So I think what we'll do is get started now, and if more people arrive in the waiting room, we'll let them in as they come. So let me just share my screen here. Okay. Okay. Is everyone able to see my screen? Oh, sorry,
yes, I can see it, Abe.
Hey, perfect. And Greg, I still see someone in the lobby. Are you able to admit them?
Yes, they're in now. Sorry.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just didn't want to know if I wanted to know that I was safe in that regard. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this evening. I'll try to get going on our topic of conversation, but we're here to really have for two purposes. Number one is to introduce the Galt Core Heritage Conservation District study, its purpose and process, and tell you a little bit more about that. And the other reason for this public information center is to create an opportunity for us to hear from the community and learn about what you value about the study area. And so tonight in attendance, just by way of introductions, I am Abraham Plunkett Latimer, and I'm the Senior Planner Heritage with the City of Cambridge, and I am Project Manager for the Galt Core Heritage Conservation District project. And this evening we are also expecting to be joined by Mayor Catherine McGarry, Councillors Jen Liggett, Donna Reed, Pam Wolf, and Mike Devine, by Elaine Brunshaw, the Chief Planner for the City of Cambridge, Deanne Fries, the Manager of Development, and Danielle Manton, the City Clerk. We also have a number of members of the consultant team present here that you'll see on the screen. So Rebecca Sierra, Consultant Project Manager with ASI, Christina Martins, the Lead Cultural Heritage Specialist, also with ASI, Laura Wickett, the Survey and Evaluation Lead with ASI, Uta Maya Giambattista, Public Engagement Lead and Planning and Urban Design Lead with Foten Planning, and Nathan Petroshin, Planner with Foten. And so I'd like to just go over our agenda for this evening to give you an idea of how the evening will play out. So right now we're going through some opening remarks, telling you about how the study is, or the evening is going to look, and introducing the members of the team. In a moment, Uta will walk us through how to participate in this evening. Then we've got a brief presentation from about 6:10 to 6:30 on the Heritage Conservation District study. After that point, we'll go into a question and answer period where members of the consultant team and city staff will be here to answer questions that you have about the study. We'll take a short 10-minute break. And then for the last hour, from roughly 7 to 8 p.m., we will separate off into breakout group sessions. And the objective of those is going to be for us to discuss Galt Core in a little more detail, learn about what elements of the study area you think are important, and give an opportunity for us to learn a little bit more. So with that, I'll let Uta take over for a moment and just walk through a bit of process of how the evening is going to work.
Hi, thank you, Abe. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for making time to attend the kickoff meeting for this important study. it's important to remind you that we are here to share our initial summaries and our initial explorations of the study area, but also to get many of your questions answered on the actual process and results of conducting an HCD, as well as your input on what makes this area so special, how you think the preservation and conservation of the area could be implemented, and many other questions that will be really detailed during the third part of the breakout session. It will be important for you to stick with us for the second component right after the break. There will be more detailed instructions on how to use this amazing technological virtual format, so you can actually annotate and participate fully, as if, not quite as if we were in person, but as much as if we were in person. For this first component, I want to remind you that you will need to raise your hand in order so we can take your questions towards the end of during part 2, and to please make sure if you have any further notes or comments that you want to make, you can use the chat function, which is found at the bottom of your screen. You will have a little bubble with the chat text where you can click and input any additional information that you may want to share while others are asking questions, or while the team answers your questions. So the other important thing is that for you to know is that this part up to the break will be recorded. Unfortunately, the breakout rooms don't have a recording feature, but we will have a whole team recording and notating your comments, so we ensure that we have a complete verbatim record of what was said. And with that, I will hand it back to Abe for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to add to what Una was saying in terms of the session being recorded, is that this will be posted tomorrow on the City of Cambridge YouTube page. And so you'll be able to view it there as well. So let me just get into my presentation. We'll start off by talking about the purpose of the study. So the purpose of the Galt Core Heritage Conservation District study is about figuring out whether this area should be designated as a heritage conservation district. To a little bit more detail in a few minutes about what that might mean for properties in the study area, but I wanted to start off by explaining a little bit about how we've gotten to this point. So when we talk about Galt Core, for the purposes of this study, we mean the area shown on the map on the right. It includes approximately 270 properties in downtown Cambridge, with a northern boundary of Park Hill Road, an eastern boundary of Wellington Street, a southern boundary of Concession Street, and a western boundary of the Grand River. The area contains a mix of commercial, institutional, and residential uses and forms the downtown of the former city of Galt. The study area boundary was determined through public consultation and was presented to Council in 2018. You may be wondering a little bit about the donut hole that you see in the center of the map. That is actually the existing Main Street Heritage Conservation District, which is excluded from this study. So why is part of Galt Core being considered as a potential heritage conservation district? Downtown Galt has been recognized since at least the 1980s as having a unique heritage identity within the city of Cambridge. So the existing Main Street Heritage Conservation District plan was designated in 1985. In 2008, the City Council adopted a cultural heritage master plan for the city of Cambridge, which identified Galt City Centre as a special character area to be evaluated as a potential heritage conservation district. In 2013, Council adopted downtown and Main Street urban design guidelines, And these guidelines recommended an expansion of the existing Main Street HCD, Heritage Conservation District, be considered. And in 2018, Council asked staff to look into options for better conserving heritage assets in Galt Core. At that time, the Senior Planner Heritage determined through public engagement that there was support for a Heritage Conservation District study for Galt Core. And at that time, Council approved the study to begin in 2020, pending the available budget. And I just wanted to say, I mentioned HCD. That's just a short form for Heritage Conservation District. And so that may show up again as we move through the presentation. So why is it important that this study be undertaken now? The city of Cambridge is actually among the fastest growing communities in Canada, with a population growth of 2% just last year, according to Statistics Canada. Only Halifax grew as rapidly as Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge. And with a proposed light rail station coming, Galt Core is expected to experience significant growth. It's important that this change that's coming is done right. In order to prepare for this expected growth, the City of Cambridge has initiated a number of studies that will lay out a clear, harmonized framework for future growth. These include a growth and intensification study, a citywide zoning bylaw review, a height guideline study, and a visualization study. These studies will help answer questions like what kind of height and density are appropriate for Galt Core. The Galt Core Heritage Conservation District has been prioritized by City Council as an important piece of this framework. The goal for all of these studies is that they'll work together to come up with clear and consistent policies that will help identify and conserve what's important about Galt Core while the City of Cambridge continues to grow. So how does a Heritage Conservation District study help to define what's important to the City of Cambridge, and how does it fit into this proposed harmonized framework? I think there's some value in going over briefly what a Heritage Conservation District is and what a Heritage Conservation District does. So a Heritage Conservation District, according to the Ontario Heritage Trust, is a defined geographical area. It's protected under a bylaw to conserve existing heritage character, and it's managed by a district plan with policies and guidelines tailored to the area's conservation, protection, and enhancement requirements. So the City of a Heritage Conservation District bylaw is what gives the district its heritage status under the Ontario Heritage Act and outlines its significance. The Heritage Conservation District Plan is a collection of policies that apply to the district to help maintain that significance. At their core, Heritage Conservation Districts are not about stopping change, but about managing it. They identify clearly what's important about a district's heritage and then put in place policies to help conserve that value. These include putting in place guidelines for altering heritage buildings, and design guidelines for new development so that it enhances the area's character. So here, for example, is an image from a Heritage Conservation District plan that was adopted recently in St. Thomas. The plan is identified that the street wall was an important part of the experience of the retail Main Street. A policy was put in place to require that the setback of new development needed to be similar to the existing buildings on the street to maintain that pedestrian experience. Other things that often show up in HCD plans are regulation of things like requiring important heritage features be conserved if possible, like windows, or suggesting compatible materials for construction, like encouraging the use of brick. Downtown Cambridge already has a number of individually designated properties like the old post office or Cambridge City Hall. But an HCD considers the area much more broadly than protecting individual properties, and can include things like streets, landscapes, and views, among other things. So do HCDs stop development? No. The goal of an HCD, as I said, is to not preserve an area as a museum artifact, but rather to help protect what's important about heritage assets and to guide new development to be compatible. And so pictured here is the Conestoga College campus, which was recently constructed within the City of Cambridge's Blair Village Heritage Conservation District. So it's just an example of, development can continue to happen as long as it's appropriate. Heritage conservation districts have become common in Ontario as a way for communities to help conserve the identity of their special places. There are now 134 heritage conservation districts in Ontario and 3 heritage conservation districts in the City of Cambridge, including Main Street, Dixon Hill, and Blair Village. And so this is just a map showing where heritage conservation districts are dispersed across the province. It's just about everywhere. So that's just a brief overview of HCDs in general. Let's shift gears a little bit to talk about what's going on with Galt Core, because that's why you're here. What I want to emphasize is that an HCD study, which we're here to talk about today, is not the same as a heritage conservation district plan. The process to designate an HCD typically takes at least a year and is divided into 2 main phases, the study phase and the plan phase. The study phase is about gathering information and making recommendations. It means that council has been satisfied that there may be enough value in the study area that it's worth exploring further. At the conclusion of the study, its findings are presented to council with a report recommending whether or not the area should be designated. At that point, council will make a decision about whether to continue with the preparation of an HCD plan or to not designate the district. If council chooses to go forward with the plan, that process will involve additional opportunities for public input at that time. So you can see on the graphic here, we've got the study phase is scheduled for about 6 months. In spring 2021, recommendations are intended to go to council. Council will make the decision then whether to move forward with the plan phase. If they choose not to, the project will be finished. If they choose to move forward, that will be another approximately 6 months. And so let's focus on the study for now without getting into the plan at this point. So there are 3 main tasks in the study. The first is research, the second is evaluation, and the third is recommendations. And I'm going to go through this process in a little more detail for each part, but this is just to give you a quick overview of what this process looks like. So the first research task that gets undertaken is an area history. And so the consultants we've engaged will be looking into archival research, maps, historical documents, any information that gets provided to them to try to produce a general history of the area, thinking about patterns of settlement, important events, key industries, notable residents, and major changes that have happened in the town, or in the city rather. The second key part of the research is going to be an inventory of heritage assets. And so the team will be going around throughout the study area, surveying the built form, surveying the actual physical environment that they're in, looking at things like building styles, heights, massing, decorative features, materials, views, natural features, and open spaces, and collecting that information to help inform the later study. So they'll look at all of these different things here. The third, the key part of the research is community engagement, which we are undertaking right now. And community engagement is really important because it allows the study to reflect what the community actually values. So instead of just looking at the historical sources, just looking at the built form that's in the area, it's really important to also know what people value. And so that's what we're hoping to achieve tonight, is this starting that conversation about what people value. Moving on from the research phase, we'll get into the character analysis phase of the project. So that's going to compile all of the research that has been put together from that first stage of work, and it's going to distill what gives the area its significance. So, for example, the research may uncover that commercial development was an important theme, and properties that contribute to that story might be highlighted. Or maybe the study will find that 30% of the buildings in the study area have been constructed of granite or are built in a Romanesque style. And so that is an important part of the identity. Some things that may be considered are things like what kind of building forms are there? When were buildings constructed? What kind of patterns of development were there? What kind of important views are there? Were there important routes that people took within the city? Are there important natural features? And finally, we'll get to the recommendations step. So that's going to be based primarily on this character analysis that has taken place, but will create key recommendations moving forward that will go to council. So key things that will be in the recommendations are a statement describing what the area's significance is. It will be, clear and targeted. This is what the significance of the area is considered to be. It will describe changes to existing policies that might be necessary, and it will also make recommendations as to the boundary of the Heritage Conservation District, which may be slightly different from the study area boundary. So in terms of our next steps, what's going on right now is that the team has started researching the history of the area. They have started preparing their materials for the on-the-ground survey, and they've started going through the policy review. What will be coming next will be more opportunities for engagement, which I'll get into in a moment. And they will move forward with this research phase before moving into the character analysis stage and then moving into the recommendations phase. There will be more opportunities for involvement as we move through the process. So how to get involved? There are a number of ways that we can get involved. Number one is to check out our website, and you're actually able to subscribe to the project website page to be notified when updates come out. And we've also prepared a survey, which I think I may have enough time to show you. No, I don't think I do. I've got 3 minutes left. If we have time later on, I can bring you to the survey, but we've prepared a survey and map online on Engage Cambridge. And I would really encourage you to check that out. The goal of the survey is to build on what we've talked about this evening in the breakout groups to fill in more information about what you may value about the study area and what questions you may have. And then there's also a map function where we're asking you to drop points on the map and with a little description of what's important about them. And so if there's interest, we can come back to that and take a look at that website and walk through it. But in the interest of moving forward, I'll avoid that for now. And you're able to find the link to Engage Cambridge on the cambridge.ca/GaltCoreHCD. There will also be coming up a property owner workshop where property owners will be invited to come and talk about their thoughts about the study and talk about what impacts it may have on their properties. There will also be project update sessions. And so we are inviting you to take part in these. These sessions are going to be led by myself, and they'll be held over WebEx when the consultant's findings start to come in. The sessions will be focused on presenting the research to date and getting feedback on it. And if you'd like to join to join these sessions, just please send me an email to be added to the list, and I'll send an invite when they're coming out. It'll be just a very informal drop in, hear about the project, give some feedback. And then finally, there will also be a second public information center that will be held towards the end of the study. The date for that has not been scheduled yet, but it will likely be in April. And the goal of that will be to come back with some of the findings and some of the recommendations and get some input on what people think about how those have been put into practice, to say, you know, this is what we told you. Have you actually captured that? And so with that, here's my contact information. And again, this is going to be the presentation and a recording of the presentation are going to be posted online. So don't worry about taking this down now. And you're also able to find my contact information on cambridge.ca/galtcorehcd. And with that, we are at 6:30. So I would like to move into the question and answer session now to make sure that we have enough time to do that. And so I just wanted to highlight a little bit how we'd like the process to work. So what we'd like is to ask questions through the chat function. If you're not able to do that or choose not to do that, certainly you can also raise your hand and we can ask a question that way. I'd like you to please identify who the question is directed to. So if it's for myself, or if it's directed towards Rebecca or one of the other consultants, just make it clear who you'd like to answer. And we'll answer the questions in the order that they're received. And just so that you know, if we run out of time to get through all of the questions this evening, then you're very, very welcome to send additional questions to me anytime. This isn't just a one-time moment to ask a question. So with that, I will close my PowerPoint and we can get into some discussion.
Ave, I'm sorry, obviously my dogs have to start barking on cue, but I will ask everybody to also turn on their cameras if that's something that you're okay with. I can help you to kind of, as you raise your hands to ask questions, I can keep tabs on the order of the hand raising, Abe, so I can kind of feed the questions to you if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, so let me go to on my grid, and I guess we can turn on your camera, and if you raise your hands, we can start this session.
Uta, just a quick question. Do you want people to physically raise their hand like this or use the function?
Oh, sorry. Well, either way, raise your hand digitally or just with the function, whatever works best for you.
And in order to do that through the function, you should see in the participants list on your right next to your name, there should be a little hand. If you click on that, it'll say raise hand. So you can see my hand is up, my hand is down, my hand is up, and my hand is down.
Oh. Well, I'm sure as we go through this study, there will. Oh, okay, we have Victoria. Thank you.
There's so many of these sites. It's kind of hard to figure it all out. Anyway, I was actually on council during the Dixon Hill designation back in '99, and that was an experience that was challenging at best. So. Having been a resident of Galt, West Galt, and downtown Galt for virtually my entire life, I'm familiar with a lot of the properties that are there, and some of the properties that are no longer there. Matter of fact, about 3 years ago, I donated what's called a fire map to the city. I'm not really sure where it ended up, but it was dated from the mid 40s. So anything that was built in all of Galt, streets, houses, businesses, everything was shown on this map. So that would probably be a really excellent reference for the history, and then of course what's changed since then. My question is kind of twofold. There are some buildings that have been left vacant from as early as the 70s. In one particular property actually is on Main Street, which I do know is part of the, not is excluded from this, but it was the old office supply building, which some of you may remember, or some of you may not know. So that building, and I am also a retired insurance broker, and I actually insure a lot of these buildings. So I'm pretty familiar with them on the inside and out. So some of them are pretty dilapidated, concerned about the cost of restoring becomes so extravagant, and we have seen the consequences of that recently. Where are we going when it comes to maintaining maybe the facade? Are you concerned about some of the details, the historic details within the buildings? There's the stability of the structures, the safety of the structures, even some of those walls, those units in the middle of the street came down that could compromise the entire block. So I'm just concerned and wondering what really the expectation is, not only for the community from perhaps a financial obligation, but also from a future developer, from the opportunities that may be presented, but some of the challenges or the roadblocks or requirements. And I mean, I can go back to something as simple as a window. Is it going to be a wood window? Is it going to be something that looks like that window? I mean, we have to be able to be sensitive to the historical value of the buildings, but we have to work with the future endeavors and the future prosperity of our community to make it all come together. So I don't really know if there's where the question isn't all there, maybe more a comment, but so I think there's a lot of things that we need to be thinking about. And I grew up on the west side in one of those big old houses. I still live on the west side in a newer house. So I completely understand both sides of the story. Very sensitive and sympathetic, but also want to see Galt, who has been thought of as being like a beautiful European town, but we have yet to capitalize on all of those wonderful compliments we have. And I would like to see that happen. So
thank you. Thank you, Victoria. I think you got to the nuts and bolts of one of the key questions that we HCD conservation and the extent of it and the financial implications. So unless Ave, you want to jump on to, I think Rebecca or Christina will have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, so just one point is I think that certainly the city of Cambridge is also looking forward to encouraging, good development in this area. So it wouldn't be about, making restrictions so tight that nothing can happen. We haven't figured out the details of the plan as well. There are in other places, there have been things like heritage grants that are put in place along with the plan to assist in reaching those goals. And certainly we would be looking for a balance in terms of policies that would be guiding growth positively, but not stopping all growth from happening at all. And so things like the interiors usually, in fact, I don't think ever, are included in under the Heritage Conservation District plan. So it would be just exteriors. Yeah, Mayor McGarry.
Thank you. I just wanted to note that I put a note in the chat. I've noticed that more of my council colleagues have joined than were expected. So there's 5 of us, which is council quorum. So I'm going to be leaving the meeting. Thanks everyone for joining. I really look forward to seeing this work progress from somebody who chaired the Dixon Hill Heritage Conservation District study and the Heritage Master Plan for the City of Cambridge. I can't be more excited to see us finally progressing with this. So I'm going to leave so we don't have more.
Mayor, I think you don't have to leave because the clerk so graciously has agreed in very short notice to attend the meeting. So if you need to leave, that's okay, but it's all good.
I'll defer to the clerk. I just don't want to be breaking any procedural rules.
Yeah. Thank you.
If I might, you're not breaking any rules because I'm here, so you're perfectly okay to continue with your presence.
That is a very big relief. So I will just quietly go back and ignore what I just said. Thanks for joining, though. I will certainly say that. Thank you. Lots of great interest.
Rebecca, did you want to add to my comment?
Sure. I think there's a couple of points I just want to build on, and thank you, Victoria, for raising, as you just said, I think some of the fundamental questions we often work through with people and property owners and community members when working on conservation districts. So I think there's a couple pieces that Abe brought up, that part of any development of a plan, when you get to that phase, certainly would include us looking at what are some other implementing tools or recommendations that we would make, and a lot of those often hinge around grants or property tax incentives that can best support conservation or preservation in a way that's workable. The other is the sort of the first task of the plan phase, if and when this Galt gets to that place, is to define what are the objectives of the district. And that's not based on what I think or what Abe thinks, but it's a big part of the consultation process during the plan phase, and that is heavily informed by property owners. And the objectives of the conservation district aren't the same everywhere. Based on the mix of people, factors, intensification priorities, those objectives can be really quite kind of tailored to speak to, I think, some of the very precise issues that you've identified with respect to what kind of level of kind of change management is everyone expecting here. And then everything flows out of those objectives in terms of guidelines and policies. So it's a piece of the plan phase that sometimes gets overlooked, but it's very important to kind of set the terms of engagement for everyone. The very important issues that you brought to the table feed into the ultimate direction that's put forward. The other piece about a conservation district is that for a major change, and I think that's what you're talking about, like a full building demolition or, removing exterior walls, like big kinds of changes like that, would ultimately likely go to council for approval or not. And it often becomes then a discussion of what are the various factors that are going to feed into the decision making. So it goes through a public process, and there's an opportunity to consider what are the objectives for the conservation district against other considerations like structural stability is one of them, or how does this project meet intensification goals, that then becomes a discussion. So I think the financial incentives that get recommended, the process for creating the guidelines, and then also the process for approving particular changes and applications all feed into creating a process that people have some certainty about, and that it's a negotiated process.
Thank you, Rebecca and Abe. I know that next on the list I have Elaine, followed by Michelle Goodrich.
Thank you. Elaine Brunshaw here. I just wanted to it was just the procedural matter that the mayor was referring to. And I can share that the City of Cambridge currently does have incentive programs that apply to key parts of our city. We have a core area downtown Galt incentive program that deals with facade improvements. We have heritage grants that are administered by our Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee for designated heritage properties. And so those are all things that can be looked at as part of some recommendations that will eventually be coming out of the study as well, to look at the existing programs that we have in place for incentives. And if there are additional recommendations, those can be considered by staff and council before final decisions are made about whether the programs need to stay as is or be further refined. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Michelle?
Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. This is a question about process, and forgive my ignorance. I'm wondering, so the study is currently ongoing, and it appears that it could be some time before this area would fall under an HTD if that is so deemed appropriate. And I'm wondering what the process then is for this area if someone were to submit a development application, because it may alter the study's objectives, or it may alter the overall recommendations if change were to happen during that time period. So I'm just wondering if there are any sort of additional processes for development, or if it is halted, or any sort of guidance you could give on that would be great.
Mm-hmm. So for right now, we are reviewing every development application that comes in very carefully to determine if there would be impact on the heritage strategy or on the heritage conservation or conservation of heritage value of the district. And there are certainly, tools that we can put in place if the value of the district is put under threat before the study can be completed.
Thank you, Abe. Does that answer your question, Michelle? I don't think I see any other hands. So.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. So that would just be then on a case-by-case basis, I assume.
Yeah, that's the approach we're taking right now.
Deanne?
I just wanted to add to that development applications that are received, regardless of what other studies are going on, we are obligated to continue to process those development applications. If a property was located on a heritage designated property or beside a heritage designated property, we would require them to do a heritage study the same way as any other development. So we can't stop the development from happening and waiting for these other studies to be done. We have a number of different studies that we have going on in the Galt core. We're just trying to get moving on them as quickly as we possibly can, so they can help inform more information in the downtown core.
Thank you, Deanne. I also have it here on the chat that Jean Liggett has uploaded some information on a designated private home. I think learning a little bit more about this specific home will be a key component of our next session breakout rooms, Jan. So if you can kind of elaborate on that and share more information with your group, that would be great.
Sorry, could I add to that?
Yeah.
So I understood your comment, Councillor Liggett, that it was with reference to my comment on the Part 5 versus part 4. I apologize for that. I didn't get a chance to come back to it yet.
Okay.
So that
It's not in the downtown. The one
yeah.
with murals is, but the other one is not.
Okay.
So thank you for that clarification. That typically in a part 5 designation, so a heritage district, interiors are not included, but they are included in some circumstances for a part 4 designation. So designated under part 4 of the Heritage Act instead of part 5. And I think that's good clarification to make because I didn't make that clear enough at the time. I have received a couple of private questions as well here. So let me go into those. So are there still plans in place for a high-rise apartment building beside the Galt bus station? Once the HCD becomes finalized, there would be no high-rises allowed, correct? So I can't comment on the plans for the high-rise beside the Galt bus station. I would guess Deanne or Elaine may have more information on that specific application. But I can say that when the HCD becomes finalized, it would not necessarily be the case that there would be no high rises permitted. That part of what is being determined is what is the appropriate height for this area? Where can growth be directed in ways that won't impact heritage attributes? And so that's still being explored, and it's going to be looking at the issue both within the height guideline study I mentioned, the growth and intensification study, and these other concurrent studies in addition to heritage to make sure that growth happens where it should. And so we won't know until the studies are completed what kind of height caps will be in place or what kinds of recommendations will be in place. And I think it's too early to say at this point what that may end up being. I don't know, Deanne or Elaine, did you want to add to that?
I'm not sure what more I can add. It is an application that we currently are reviewing. So that application is currently under review. We don't know what the final outcome of that application will be and what the height will be. But we do have to, as I said before, we do have to continue to process development applications that are received while these studies are ongoing.
Thank you both. I have another hand from Nadia Colton.
Good evening. I was interested in knowing the degree to which your study is going to address the issue of those owners of what are probably historic properties, what you can do or what your study can do about preventing them from allowing the properties to deteriorate to the point where the possibility of doing anything to save any aspect of them is economically not viable.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think that the study will make suggestions for how properties can be improved and could put in place links to our funding available for designated structures as well. The city is looking into options for strengthening the property standards bylaw to address that issue as well, but it would be addressed through those means rather than through the Heritage Conservation District study. And I believe that the study is looking into, or the city is looking into that right now.
Suggesting that your study will make no recommendations about what needs to happen to the property standards bylaw? Or are you saying that the property standards bylaw is currently being studied? And if that's the case, tell me about how that got started, who's working on it, and when there's going to be a presentation of this to the public so that we can understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it would not typically be underneath what would be considered in the study, but it is certainly something that is very important and that the city is looking at. And I think maybe Elaine, would you have more detail on that specific issue?
Yes, thank you. At the end of January, there was a report included on the council agenda about various heritage suite of tools that are available. One of the items included a review of the property standards bylaw. There will be a report coming back to council in mid-March, responding to all the items, not all the final answers and details, but just a work plan for each of the items that council wants staff to report back on. So in that follow-up report, Nadia, there will be additional information about the work plan for the review of the property standards bylaw and general information about public engagement related to that. So please stay tuned for a report around mid-March or late March on following up on some items relating to heritage that, again, were presented to council at the end of January. Thank you.
Rebecca?
And I just wanted to add that as part of our scope of work after the study phase occurs and should the plan phase get initiated and get off the ground, that work concludes with making recommendations about changes to official plan policies as well as bylaws in general. So during the plan phase, we would be looking at things like property standards bylaw and making some general recommendations with regard to how that bylaw may need to be revised to best support implementation of a plan. But that would be really at the tail end of our work, and we would certainly build on obviously what the city is undertaking right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe we have just time for one final question. This comes from Ruth Sanderson. Can the historical interplay between the river and the community be part of what's considered and what we value in the heritage area? Is that the sort of thing that could come forward as part of what the community values? And yes, it is. I think you will find through our second section that there will be a wide, plenty of opportunity to comment on what makes Galt unique. And obviously, we understand the river to be fundamental to that uniqueness. So we look forward to more of your input, Ruth. Unless you Faith or Rebecca want to add on that point, maybe we should give everybody 3 minutes to refresh their cups and come back, please. Don't disappear for the next session.
Okay, thanks, Yuta. So at 7 o'clock, we will reconvene?
Yes.
Okay.
7 o'clock. Thank you all. Okay, I think everybody came back. That's good news. Should we give it one more minute? I think everybody that had their cameras on has them on right now. Oh, you found it. Are you sharing the?
So I just wanted to.
Yeah, good.
I just wanted to put up our Engage Cambridge site just so people could take a look at it while we're waiting. So you'll see that there are 2 parts to it. One is the survey part. And you can put in your take survey here. And it'll just ask you a series of questions, and you can fill in the blanks with whatever information you want there. And if I can go back, the second part is here for the map annotations. So you can go to your map. The study area is on here. And what you can do is add a pin. So you can identify a special place, a building that doesn't reflect Galt's character, and sites spaces, buildings, or open space opportunities that you think could strengthen Galt's character. And so you would just choose the pin and drop it on your map. So let's say right here, and then add in a comment about why that was important. And so the site is going to be live for the next 2 weeks.
Thank you, Ave. I think you all will find that the survey pretty much will touch on aspects and elements that we will be addressing through the next hour. Each in our group will be divided into 3 distinctive breakout rooms. Each room will have a person from our consulting team facilitating. They will take you through the entire explanation on how to participate. There's a little bit of technology involved where you can actually annotate the maps. So we will guide you through that. If you cannot find how to do it, not to worry, we will do it for you. As long as you provide input, we're happy with that. We'll circle back at the end of 40 minutes. You will have about 3 to 4 questions to go through. We will come back to the plenary room, the room we are right now, for you to share your group's specific input and specific ideas on the specific questions. And we'll conclude with closing remarks and next steps, just so we recap on what we are doing next and when we will meet next. So I think without further delay, we may start. Greg, if you can help us kind of assign people to the different break rooms. If you by any chance could hit or click on the red X and it are dumped back into this plenary room, I will remain here and I can send you back. Or if you want to have a separate conversation, I also will remain here. So not to worry, we'll guide you through the process. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. So we are running 4 minutes late. So I hope you all enjoyed the experience. I know each one of your groups went through the procedure and hopefully assign a speaker that can, in about 2 minutes, really point to the key elements and the key questions and important elements that your group discussed. So I'm wondering if Rebecca, your team can start first.
Sure. Thanks, Uta. First of all, I want to thank all of everyone that was in our breakout session for all of their contributions. We did not finish our discussion and unceremoniously got bumped out in the middle of conversation about the boundary. So when we get to that point of summarizing, I'd like to open up to everyone that was in our breakout room to share anything further that we weren't able to. So Nathan and I and Elaine, if you're able to contribute anything further that we don't hit on, are going to summarize some of the key points that we talked through. So in terms of sort of standout buildings and places or spaces in downtown Galt, some key places that were discussed, and Nathan, I'll start, and then if you want to fill in some of the pieces from our end. Places like the Carnegie Library and Farmers Market area, the square with the library and the Idea Exchange, the river being a key part, views across the river to churches was another piece. the Armory and Branch 121 were talked about, as well as a couple other key buildings that, Nathan, do you want to draw on those?
I think that you have actually gotten all of them. There was a building on Water Street that was mentioned as well, and we spoke a little bit to its history as a synagogue and through multiple uses, which was quite interesting. And something else that was interesting that Rebecca just spoke to was those views to the Idea Exchange and the views along Main Street are quite important, as well as the obvious built heritage in downtown Galt.
And one additional area was Millrace Park for the amphitheater. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Then in talking about what are some of the places that detract from Galt's character, our charm, raised some really important discussions within our group about, if we had to show someone like what's the standard we want to aspire to or not to aspire to, there was some really good touch points. Some points that were raised were about signage being a really important piece that can really detract or support from an area like this. You can have a totally out of place sign in terms of scale, color, material, or location. That can really, like I said, detract or get it right. Some specific commercial properties were identified as could have been done better in terms of signage. And then some other points of discussion around this topic were related to height. And if you don't get the height right, you don't get the management of change right. In an area like this. There was some discussion about what are the materials that would be appropriate in a place like downtown Galt, and some further discussion about maybe it's not the specific materials, but it's about having a consistent set of expectations about design. And maybe it doesn't matter if it's steel or stone and modern materials, but if the scale is sympathetic and there's consistency between all of the things that are happening in terms of infill, that can be really impactful in an important and productive way. And that there's a overall sympathetic and compatible approach to development were some of the key ideas that came out during that discussion. Then finally, we did not get through boundary at all. I think we all wanted probably about an hour together to talk through these questions. But boundary, a key piece was what's on the other side of the river and how that frontage on the other side of the river relates. And some key pieces that were talked about was George Street being an idea on the other side of the river, and a park on that side of the area. And Elaine and Nathan, if there's some other pieces around the boundary discussion that you recorded that you want to share.
The only other piece I wanted to share is that we also discussed that right now the study area starts at the river and moves eastward because there is a designated district for the Dixon Hill area that applies to the publicly owned land, so roads, the street lights, parks, retaining walls that are on public property. And because you can't have a district overlaying another district, the boundary of this area starts where Dixon Hill ends, but it has been noted that there's interest in perhaps providing more protections for privately owned properties on the Dixon Hill area, and that this study will also provide recommendations about the extent of the study area.
Great. Thank you, Elaine. And just before I wrap up a summary of our breakout room, I'd like to invite anyone else that was within that room, if there was anything further you want to share, given that we didn't appropriately conclude the discussion. Further comments? Okay. Well, thank you everyone for all of the contributions in that room.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And we actually let you stay a little bit longer than 40 minutes. And then realized that we had to bring you back. So I know it's there. you need time to really delve into all these topics. But we'll go with Laura's team.
Hi, Uta, everyone. So yes, our team, our group also had, I think, a great discussion around some of the questions, and we did not complete our boundary exercise. Abraham, you've offered to summarize our discussion for the group. If you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, so can everyone hear me all right? Okay, good. So we touched on a lot of the same things that Rebecca mentioned. So the river being really important, the views being really important. I won't go into a lot of detail because I'm cognizant of the time. But just a couple things that we added on top of that, we're thinking more about sort of workers' cottages, sort of working class past. That was something that was really important in terms of our discussion. And otherwise, yeah, very, very similar kinds of sentiments as the other group.
Were you able to speak to the boundary, at least in principle, or?
So we spoke a little bit about the boundary of downtown being sort of the whole river valley, and the idea that that potentially this could be served through multiple HCDs or multiple studies, that it didn't necessarily need to be encompassed in this one, but that there were a lot of resources outside of the study boundaries as well that should be protected through some means.
Okay. Is anybody in that group that wants to further contribute any other aspects, comments? Okay, so let's go with Christina's team.
Thank you. So we also did not complete the boundary exercise, though I encouraged our group to print out a map and draw some lines on it, and feel free to email Abraham. So because all of the other questions are covered in the online survey, so can be completed online, but that perhaps if people had ideas about boundary that they hadn't had a chance to share, that they could share them that way. A lot of the same themes came up in our group as well in terms of important buildings or streets. A couple places that I haven't heard yet that we talked about in our group was some of the commercial properties along Ainsley Street, and that they tend to have more staying power and strength compared to the Main Street businesses that have more turnover. I think in the end we had numerous locations along the river circled as special places, as well as views associated with the bridges and certain properties along there. And we also jumped to the other side of the river to pick up additional special places that included several of the churches and one of the commercial properties and views to those. For the next piece, we had some specific properties that were mentioned that don't contribute to the character, and they included the Food Basics commercial building, the old city hall that dates from the 60s or 70s that's on Water Street, and a few of the banks located along Main Street that are later 20th century buildings as well. Is there anyone, maybe Deanne from your notes, that you would like to add, or anyone else from our group? Oh, and I should mention the dam was snuck in, that the dam just north of Park Hill, the northern bridge, was mentioned as an important part of the boundary. But is there anything else?
No. Okay, I think your suggestion of really emailing Ave with any further ideas on the boundary it's well taken. There will be further instances, and I think Ave, through your updates, I think further clarification or further brainstorming on that specific aspect could be undertaken. We obviously will have a meeting with property owners, and we'll come back to you on a second meeting just to continue to flush many of these more in detail aspects of the study. But I think that basically kind of concludes this initial input quest, and we really hope that you do follow us. I think we find through the work that ASI and FO10 does together that more so than just attending today, we do need you to follow us through the process, because the information and the investigations and research builds on each other. And it's important to have the history and the legacy of people that was involved and from the beginning in every single public consultation. So the input is more so meaningful because you were there from the beginning with us. So thank you so much for making time. And I will let Rebecca and Abe to. Somebody's raising their hand. Oh, you're muted, Rebecca.
Jan had her hand up.
Sorry, thank you, Jan.
It would be very helpful if you could send us the maps that you were working with in the slides. But I must say that if you're going to send us the maps, make sure we can read them. They're not so tiny that we can't see them. But the slides would be very helpful too. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
And Uta, I was just going to ask one thing that we've often found when working on similar studies in other places is that your contributions tonight have been so important. You probably know of other people that are interested in the study. If you can please share information about the project website. Input is such an essential piece of a study like this. It's for the community that lives here, works here, visits here. So the more people can share information with about how they can contribute, that's really helpful and important.
Thank you.
So I think since we are now past 8 o'clock, I can stick around if anyone wants to, make any more comments to me. I'm very happy to do that. But I appreciate so much everyone taking the evening to help us out with this, to learn about the study and offer really, really insightful comments. And I hope that we can produce a study that does them justice. Thank you so much.